Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitch TV, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin. Happy Monday, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me every Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Got a great show for you before the New Year's. Former Wisconsin offensive lineman David Moorman is going to be joining me in about 30 minutes, talking some more NFL. Can't wait to discuss the Clippers losing by 51 points to the Dallas Mavericks. A great Malkin's moments for you. This is going to be a jam-packed show. I cannot wait. I've been excited. I couldn't sleep all day long. We're finally in Week 17 in the NFL. Week 17, holy cow. This is crazy. I literally remember Week 1. And speaking of Week 1, let's shift to the way that we started the NFL season to where we are right now. So the Rams lost to the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks clinched their division title in the NFC West for the first time since 2016. And I remember coining a phrase back in Week 1 when the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Houston Texans to open up this 2020 football season. I coined the phrase, I said that defense is not what wins championships. Timely defensive stops is what wins championships, and I stick by that. You look at that Rams-Seahawks game yesterday. This was a tied ball game, 6-6 at the half. Seahawks score on their opening possession in the second half. They go up 13-6, and the Rams go on a 12-play, 6-minute and 49-yard drive down to first and goal at the 2-yard line. Jamal Adams stops a potential game-tying touchdown run from Darrell Henderson to make it first and goal at the 2-yard line. And the Seattle Seahawks defense forces a turnover on downs against the Rams. Rams can't punch it in. They can't find a way to punch it in. Those are the timely defensive stops that the Seattle Seahawks needed, because you look at this game, and the Rams dominated another game. This was another example of a game in which they had more first downs, better conversion on third down percentage, more time of possession, more total yards, more passing yards, more rushing yards. And yet, once again, came up on the short end of the stick, just like they did against the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins, they blew out the Rams, but you look at the stats, Rams had over 400 total yards. Dolphins didn't even eclipse over 200. But it was those 4 turnovers, more penalties, a special teams touchdown that cost them the game. And the Seattle Seahawks, their defense right now is playing at a supremely high level. Through Week 7, the Seattle Seahawks in the first 7 weeks of the NFL season only had 12 sacks. Since they've made that trade for Carlos Dunlap from the Cincinnati Bengals, since Week 8 to now approaching Week 17, they've accumulated 31 sacks, 5 by Carlos Dunlap. Now we're starting to see a Seattle Seahawks team that is much more balanced and gets pressure on opposing quarterbacks. That was the biggest issue for this team, is they were relying on Herculean effort after Herculean effort from Russell Wilson week in and week out, and their defense wasn't playing well. Their running backs weren't healthy. Now we're starting to see Chris Carson rushes for 95 yards. We saw a sighting of Rashad Penny. We haven't seen him in what feels like a couple years. Obviously, Russell Wilson can still burn you with his legs. Now we're seeing a more complete, a more balanced Seattle Seahawks team that was missing for the bulk of the season. It always felt like Russell Wilson had to do everything himself. Now he's got a couple more sous chefs in the kitchen with him to help him out. Now, from the Rams' perspective, Jared Goff now, apparently it's reported that he may have suffered a broken thumb. It's impressive that he even played in the fourth quarter that he did. as much as he did. He completed 6 passes for about 79 yards. But this is why losing to the Jets was such a huge blow for this Rams team, because now they're not a lock to make the playoffs. They're not a lock to make the playoffs. You beat the Jets, you secure yourself a playoff berth. Now you go into week 17 with this uncertainty surrounding who's going to play quarterback. The backup, the Rams have one backup. That's how thin they are at quarterback. It's a guy named John Waldorf, who is an undrafted free agent in 2018 from Wake Forest. He's never played an NFL snap in his life. That's who you're going into your potential playoff hopes, is on that guy. Now, I'm going to break down the NFL playoff picture. Obviously, if they beat the Cardinals outright, they win and they make it into the final wild card spot. But if they lose to the Cardinals, they'll need the Bears to lose to the Packers. But again, this is why losing that game to the Jets was such a devastating blow, because now all this pressure shifts onto a backup potentially that's got no playing experience, that's got no playoff experience. And Jared Goff, unfortunately, the Bucs got to stop with him. I'm blaming him more than Sean McVay right now. Jared Goff has committed the most turnovers since the beginning of last year. He's committed 38 turnovers. And think about this. He's got more turnovers than Jameis Winston, who threw 30 interceptions last year. Jameis Winston was about 7/8 of the way there, probably a larger percentage. 30 interceptions last year. Jared Goff has accounted for 38 interceptions over the last 2 years. And this was the 23rd game over the past 2 seasons that Goff has had a turnover, which also is the most in the NFL. And the 5th game for the Rams in the Sean McVay era that they haven't scored an offensive touchdown. So now it comes down to week 17 for the Rams. But the Seahawks, I like what I'm seeing. They're starting to work into championship form, which is what you want to see at this point in the year. Defense is playing well. They're getting pressure. Russell Wilson hasn't been turning the ball over. He's not asked to do too much, but he still has that extra gear that he can shift into if need be. And come postseason time, that could be huge. Not to mention the Seahawks now actually have a chance, a potential long shot chance of getting the number 1 overall seed. If the Packers lose to the Bears, Seattle Seahawks beat the 49ers, they could end up with the number 1 overall seed. So this was a huge win for the Seattle Seahawks. But let's stick with the Midwest. Let's stick with the guys up in Green Bay. The Packers, man, dominant performance over the Titans, 40-14. This was textbook December 27th, cold, frigid, 24-degree, pouring snow type of atmosphere that the Packers absolutely thrive in. And this is why the Packers will have an advantage over every team they play, assuming they can hold on to that number 1 seed. Because the inclement weather is actually conducive for the Packers winning. They will have the advantage over every single team in the NFC that would have to play them if they have to travel to Lambeau Field. This team is already tough enough as it is to beat. And then you add the element of having to beat them in their backyard on snowy grass when it's below freezing. The Packers right now are playing the best football in the NFC. They've won 5 straight games, and their defense is what's playing well right now. We always knew about the offense. Aaron Rodgers is fantastic. Devontae Adams, I'm going to touch on both of those guys in a couple minutes. The defense is what we always had question marks about. Right now, they're top 7 defense in overall yards. They're middle of the pack against the run. and they're top 7 against the pass. And the biggest Achilles heel for this team was how could they defend against the run? You look at the 3 losses that they've suffered this year. Who did they get beat by? Guys that torched them in the ground game. They lost to the Buccaneers. Ronald Jones rushed for 113 yards, 2 touchdowns. They got blown out 38-10. They lost to the Minnesota Vikings at home, 28-22. Why? Because Dalvin Cook rushed for 163 yards and 3 touchdowns. To a lesser degree, they lost to the Indianapolis Colts in overtime, 34-31. What was a big contributing factor? Timely runs by Jonathan Taylor, 90 rushing yards. This was the first game that the Packers seemed to actually mitigate the impact of the run game. Tennessee Titans technically did accumulate 156 rushing yards. Derrick Henry still rushed for 93 yards, but the impact of those runs was severely lessened and drastically sapped. Derrick Henry didn't rush for more than 10 yards on a carry. And that was the biggest Achilles heel. Could this team contain a physical back when they had to? And you look at the postseason is defined by your ability to run the football. The postseason, running the football is what moves the chains. And then you factor in, you couple that with inclement weather and snowy conditions. The last thing that you want to do is throw the football on a snowy day or on a slick turf or on a slick field. You want to run the football. You want to take care of the football. Limit your potential mistakes. Limit the unforced errors, the ability for the opponent to be able to take advantage of easy turnovers induced by the weather. And that's what the Packers do really well. And that's why this was such an important statement for them to make, is because we needed to see, could they stop the run? And the reality is, assuming they can hold on to this number 1 seed, every game, the road to the Super Bowl will have to go through Lambeau. The weather is going to be bad. Teams are going to have to run the football on you. Can you stop them? And the Packers are showing that they can do that, or at least to enough of a degree where they can severely cripple the opponent's opportunities to dominate the game through the ground. We're not seeing that. Then you look at Davante Adams, 17 touchdowns this season, 1 touchdown short of Sterling Sharp's all-time record for most touchdowns in a Packers uniform in a season with 18. He had another monstrous day, 11 catches, 142 yards, 3 touchdowns, even wore a crown on his head. Now, initially, I thought maybe it's to mock Derrick Henry, who's commonly referred to as King Henry. That's his moniker right now. And maybe it was to try and mock him. But he also reached and eclipsed some Triple Crown achievement. And Davante Adams, he's got swag. He's got speed. If you looked at his shoes, it didn't even look like he was wearing socks out there and it was 24 degrees out. That's a baller move, man. Not even wearing socks and it's 24 degrees out. You're slipping and sliding all over the turf and all over the snow. And then here's the other thing. And I've said this before. I said this earlier in the year. The Packers are one of the best teams at building leads. They might be the best first half team in the league. This year, the Packers are 10-0 when they've led at the half. They're 3-1-1 in games in which they were either trailing or tied at the half. 10-0 when they're leading. What does that mean? Well, what that means is that they're doing a great job of providing comfort and they're taking the pressure off of Aaron Rodgers to be spectacular because they do their most damage in the first half. So instead of Aaron Rodgers having to put the team on his back and be Hercules, He's not being asked to do that. And if he is, maybe it's just for one series. Maybe it's just for one snap. And this team is deep. And again, at home, the Packers really don't lose. Over the last 2 years, they're 14-2 at home. They've gone 7-1 at home over their last 2 seasons. They suffered one loss last year to the Vikings at home, or to the Eagles at home. This year, one loss to the Vikings. That's it. And they play their best football at Lambeau Field since Aaron Rodgers has been the quarterback, the starting quarterback since 2008. They've played 6 home playoff games. They're 4-2 in those games. They're 2-7 on the road. This is just the second time in Aaron Rodgers' career that he could finish with the number 1 overall seed in the NFC. The last time they did that was in 2011. The Packers go 15-1, have that tremendous run in the regular season, then lose to the Giants in the NFC divisional round 37-20. At home, they lost that game. So, but the reality is this team, it plays so much more confidently at home. And I know what you're thinking. Well, doesn't that apply to every team in the NFL? Honestly, not really. Exhibit A, Kansas City Chiefs had to squeak a win at home against the Atlanta Falcons 17-14, who, by the way, I know the year 2020 has gone poorly for everyone. I don't think a year has derailed the team more than the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, my God, a 39-yard field goal to tie the game to send it to overtime, and your reliable kicker misses it. That's just classic Atlanta Falcons this year. But going back to the Packers and Aaron Rodgers, I think yesterday, Aaron Rodgers just edged out Patrick Mahomes for the MVP. 21 of 25 yesterday. 240-something passing yards. 4 touchdowns, 1 late game interception when the game was already out of hand. He's got over 4,000 passing yards, 44 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, highest QBR in the league, highest passer rating in the league, best touchdown to interception ratio. Now, I still think Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. I still think he's the MVP. But Rodgers has only had one awful game this year, and that's against the Buccaneers when they lost 38-10. He had a 12 QBR in that game. But you look at Mahomes, while he's never dropped that low, he hasn't had a terrible performance like that. He's had a couple subpar games this year, and he's got a little bit more help. So right now, Aaron Rodgers is also probably the MVP after a game like that. They've won 5 straight games. They beat the Bears or a Seattle Seahawks loss, and they lock up the number 1 overall seed in the NFC. And that would be huge for a team that is a different ball club at home than they are on the road. It's the reality. Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitch TV, Twitter, and on YouTube Mondays and Wednesday mornings, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Coming up in about 10 minutes, former Wisconsin offensive lineman David Moorman is joining the show. Cannot wait to get into our conversation with him. I got so many great questions to ask him, and I know he's excited to come on. This is going to be fun. Cannot wait to have him on. Appreciate you joining us here on a Monday morning. So let's take a look very quickly at the updated playoff picture in the NFL, because this is the first time ever, or at least since 1990, that heading into week 17, there are not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, 7 open playoff spots on the line. 7 open playoff spots heading into week 17. It's never happened since at least 1990. So let's take a look first at the AFC, because the AFC is a lot more intriguing than the NFC in a weird way, just because it includes 5 teams who all have the same record. They're all at 10-5. The Browns, the Ravens, the Dolphins, the Titans, and the Colts are all at 10-5. Only 3 spots. So this is exciting stuff. First of all, the Dolphins, credit to them. They're 10-5. I did not think they'd be there right now. And right now they're playing the Buffalo Bills. A win against the Bills, and they're in. Or a Colts loss, and they're in. One of those two scenarios. And they obviously eliminated the Raiders on, I think, Saturday, and that bizarre ending. That was a wild finish to a game. If you're the Raiders and you're up by 2 with 19 seconds left and you blow that game, shame on you. You should lose that game because that was pathetic. So that's the Dolphins right now, 10-5. They need a win or a Colts loss to stay in. The Ravens, I said this before, this team has won 4 straight games. They were going to finish hot and ride that momentum coming into the postseason. They end the year against the Bengals. So that's a likely win for them, even though I know the Bengals without Joe Burrow beat the Steelers, but I don't really care about that. The Ravens are going to blow through them. So what do they need? But right now, the Ravens just need a win or a Colts loss and they're in. Fairly similar to the Miami Dolphins. The Browns are very interesting. The Browns are almost in the same situation as the LA Rams right now. And who is it caused by? The New York Jets. That's what caused it. The New York Jets. New York Jets decided to play their best football these past 2 weeks, and now they're nearly costing the Browns a chance at the postseason. The Browns host the Steelers this week for a huge matchup, not for the division, but they win and they're in, or they need a Colts loss. A lot of these teams rely on the Colts to lose. Now we switch to the Colts and the Titans. This is what makes this so fascinating, is you've got two teams in the same division in the AFC South that have the same record and are both vying for a playoff spot. Obviously, one of them will get in, but if it's the Colts that win, the Titans have a slightly better chance. If the Colts win, because they're playing the Jaguars, they're going to need a little bit of help. The Colts need a win, and they need probably the Browns or Ravens. They need one of those teams to lose, because they beat the Titans earlier this year, and so they have that edge over them. So the Colts are kind of playing this waiting game right now. And then the Titans, very simple. They beat the Texans. They lock up the AFC South. They're in. If they lose, they're not totally out of it, but then they would need some help as well because they beat the Ravens, but they would need the Ravens, the Dolphins, or the Colts to lose. That's the only way that they're going to get in. Now we shift to the NFC. This is when things get really interesting. The NFC, Cowboys. So the Cowboys beat the Eagles yesterday. And now all of a sudden they're tied for first place in the NFC East. Now Washington still holds all the cards. And even though they lost to the Panthers, they still control their own destiny. But Washington's got to win their final game. If Washington loses their final game of the year, then the winner between the Giants and the Cowboys will determine who's going to represent the NFC East, clinch the division, and punch their ticket into the postseason and host a playoff game. And this is the most interesting stat. Whichever team wins the NFC East will be the first team in NFL history in 300 out of 342 candidates to start a season 2-7 or worse and still find their way into the postseason. That's remarkable to me. That's absolutely remarkable to me. Okay, now we've got the Rams, we've got the Cardinals, and we've got the Bears. What makes this such an interesting proposition now is the Rams, while once seemed like a lock, a surefire bet to make the postseason, at 9-4 at a matchup with the Jets, they lose that. They lose to the Seahawks. Now they're sitting at 9-6, and your starting quarterback in Jared Goff might have potentially suffered a broken thumb. So now you got to throw in a kid named John Waldorf, who's a 2018 undrafted free agent out of Wake Forest, who's never played a snap in his life. Now you're throwing him into the fire. So the Rams need to beat the Cardinals, or the Bears just need to lose, and they're in. Cardinals obviously need some help. Cardinals need to beat the Rams, and they need the Packers to beat the Bears. So right now, the pegs on this tier system. You got the Rams have the best chance to make it, the Bears the second best chance to make it, and the Cardinals the third best chance to make it. So Bears are not in a terrible spot. They either need to beat the Packers or they just need the Rams to beat the Cardinals. So that's the situation in the NFC East, just in the NFC and in the AFC. And by the way, and again, coming up in just a couple of minutes, former Wisconsin offensive lineman David Moorman is going to join the show. The Steelers picked up a huge win over the Colts. Huge win over the Colts yesterday, 28-24. I've said this before. I'm not saying this team was going to win the Super Bowl or win the championship, but they needed to end this skid, this 3-game skid. They did that. Big Ben looked a lot better, 34-49 yesterday, over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. They still couldn't run for their life, but this team played much, much better, and they're back in the win column. Okay. Final topic, and then have our guest on. Appreciate you joining me on J&J Media Network on Morning Joe, Mondays and Wednesday mornings, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. So quick NBA topic, because, and I had no intention of talking about the NBA today. I really didn't. I love the NBA. I had no intention of talking about it. And the Clippers inserted their name into my schedule today because I had to. They lost to the Dallas Mavericks. The Los Angeles Clippers lost to the Dallas Mavericks 124-73. Yes, you heard that correctly. 51 points. That is inexcusable, intolerable, atrocious, absolutely disgusting. It's a disgusting loss. There's no other way around it. That is a disgraceful and pathetic performance right there. I don't want to overreact to one game. I understand it's the regular season. Doesn't mean much. It's a pretty trivial, meaningless game. But you're playing a depleted Mavs roster at home. I understand Kawhi Leonard wasn't playing in this game, but the Mavericks didn't have Kristaps Porzingis. So there's really no excuse if you're the Clippers to lose by that margin at home. This was the largest margin of defeat in their franchise history. 51 points. You're Paul George. You're getting paid. You signed a 5-year, $226 million contract. I'm not saying you got to win the damn game, but I mean, my God, can you keep it close? Can you keep it competitive? That's what they're paying you there for. If Kawhi's not playing in the game, they need you to step up and at least bump your season average of 21.5 points last year to 30 points a game. Make this interesting. Instead, you lose by 51. And I know most people are going to think, well, maybe it was tight in the first half and then they got blown out in the second half. No. They were down 39-13 at the end of the first quarter, 77-27 at the end of the first half. This was a blowout right from the beginning. There's absolutely no excuse for it. And if you're Ty Lue, listen, you came in, you were hired to change the culture here, to be a culture changer. And instead, your team doesn't show up at all. If I'm Ty Lue, I'm making the entire Clippers team run suicides today. The entire practice is all suicides because that was absolutely pathetic the way that they came out. Okay. J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitch TV, Twitter, and on YouTube. You're watching Morning Joe. So excited now to bring on my guest today, David Moorman, a former Wisconsin offensive lineman between 2015 and 2019, an academic, all-student at Wisconsin as well. David, first of all, how are you doing, man? What's going on?
Jonah, what's going on, man? Can you hear me okay? Just making sure.
I I can hear you great. I can hear you great. You look great. How's everything going?
Awesome, man. Dude, life is good. It's good to see you. It's been a while.
It's been a long time. I want to jump right into it, David, because I got tons of questions that I want to throw your way. First of all, for me, and I'm sure you've noticed this as well, in recent years, there are certain schools that have kind of transformed themselves, converted themselves into almost incubators and NFL pipelines for specific positions. We're seeing at the quarterback position, Oklahoma's produced a number of guys. At the wide receiver position, Alabama's had a number of guys drafted, so on and so forth. And Wisconsin, while it's produced a number of great running backs, there's no question about it. To me, they're one of, if not the most premier offensive line NFL pipelines. And you look at the history of this program from guys like Joe Thomas and Ryan Ramczyk now recently, Travis Fredericks in the NFL, some of your buddies, David Edwards, Tyler Biadasz, Michael Dieter, so many different guys that I can name, right? And you got a chance to play and start for one of the few universities that actually values that position, that values the offensive line. How much pride did you take in knowing that not only were you playing for a major Division I university in Wisconsin in its own right in the Big Ten, but also playing for a university that has featured and sent so many guys from your position to the NFL level?
Yeah, man. Well, absolutely. I appreciate the question, Jonah. First of all, thank you for having me on. And to kind of dive into it, I honestly, at this point in my life, it's been like the ultimate honor for me. You mentioned it, the guys who came before me, they are a huge part of what makes playing on the offensive line at Wisconsin so special. I mean, it all started back in 1993 when they won that first Rose Bowl. Started with guys like Joe Panos, Joe Rudolph, for Stegan, all those great players who started that legacy right then and there. And over time, we've just been really fortunate to have a great group of guys kind of come in year in, year out, is kind of do what offensive linemen are supposed to do, what we're made to do, and that to be smart, tough, dependable, eat a lot of food, lift a lot of weight, go out there and just play for each other, buy into it every single day. And I'm just super fortunate to have played with some of the guys that you mentioned and had the opportunity to leave my own mark in that Wisconsin offensive line room. And, this year, obviously my Badgers, it's kind of been a different year and maybe it hasn't really gone the way that they wanted to, but I'm still so proud of the guys who are still there and fighting every day.
Absolutely. And I'm going to touch on this year as well. You obviously played with Jack Cohn. He was the starting quarterback. I know he just recently announced he's entering the transfer portal, but you got a chance to see Graham Mertz as a redshirt freshman your senior year. I've been really impressed with him, especially dealing with COVID, dealing with the inconsistencies of playing 1 week, not playing for 3 weeks, having to on the fly adjust with limited time to know the playbook. I've been really impressed with him. What did you see from him when you practiced with him? Did you know he was going to be the real deal in practice? And what do you think of the season, even though it's been an abridged season, but the season nonetheless that he's had this year?
Yeah, I've been so impressed with Graham. He came in, as a freshman, and he was one of the highest rated quarterbacks, I think, highest rated recruits, period, that Wisconsin's ever gotten. So there was a lot of hype about him coming in, but I was lucky enough to actually sit next to Graham in the locker room. His locker was right next to mine my senior year when he was a freshman. And, just sitting next to him every day, getting the chance to talk to him about football, life outside of football. There's not a better dude you could ask for to, come in and help lead the team this season. Obviously, Jack's one of my really good friends, and I had the chance to play with Jack my junior and senior year. And when he went down, someone needed to step up, and I think Graham did that to the best of his ability, and he was thrown in a tough situation. He balled out, in the biggest stage early on, and then, like you mentioned, COVID kind of put a damper on some of the stuff. But I think he responded well, and he's learning as he goes out there. The Big Ten West was a tough conference this year. There was a lot of good teams, and a lot of good defensive coaches who were throwing stuff at him, and he kept fighting and he kept playing. And I was super impressed with the poise that he played with, and honestly, the leadership too he showed when things got tough. he stayed strong and guys rallied around him, and he kept coming out there every single drive. And, obviously Minnesota, he went down, and, Chase had to come in, and you saw him on the sideline cheering Chase on, just, loving and doing everything he could to help the team. And that's what you want to see out of a quarterback and a young quarterback who has a super bright future ahead of him. So I was, not surprised, too much because I was with him. I know Graham as a person, but seeing him out there was like super special, and I'm super excited for the future.
So I want to shift to one of your adversaries, one of your opponents. Justin Fields right now has been balling, projected top 2 NFL pick behind likely Trevor Lawrence. But yes, you didn't line up directly opposite him, but you were on the same field as him twice your senior year. And you got a chance to see him play up close and personal. I think he's a tremendous talent, especially with his ability to run with his legs. What is something that what is something special that makes him such a great player that maybe the general fan wouldn't be able to see or capture on television as opposed to when you're there on the sidelines and get a chance to see him?
Yeah, I think just watching him play live and having him beat me twice, which, to this day still haunts me, but it's kind of also his biggest weakness too, because he just doesn't let plays die. And a lot of the time he'll hang onto the ball as long as he can, and it turns into a huge play, and he's so hard to bring down, and he'll, miss a tackle, get upfield, get a first down, or he'll escape a sack, throw a bomb downfield, and before you know it, Ohio State's, put 14 on you before you can, bat an eye. However, I think it's also his biggest weakness in some senses, where because he has that amazing ability to make plays happen when, things may seem dead, he hangs on the ball too long. He can sometimes, and fumble or turn the ball over or just hang on to the ball and take a huge sack, which, is never good. And Ohio State's gotten in trouble with that this year and in certain points of the season. However, I think this is his biggest thing is he keeps fighting. And, a couple games this year, Indiana, Northwestern, things were looking tough, but he still, did just enough to make that big play to put Ohio State in position to win the game. So, he's a tremendous player, and he has that athletic ability, and he finishes games, man. And it's super frustrating because Ohio State's one of those teams where, you think you have them, you think you're hanging with them, and then all of a sudden, the game's over, and you're just like, what the hell just happened? And he is kind of the catalyst with that. All of a sudden, he'll turn it on like a switch, and he might have, thrown an interception or hadn't really been playing his best ball in the first half, and he'll turn it on just when they need him, and he'll make things happen. So I'm really interested to see him, not only play in the playoff, but interested to see where he goes and how he progresses to the next level. Because whatever team ends up getting him in this upcoming draft, I think is getting a hell of an athlete who has a ton of upside. And I think if he gets a good quarterback coach and he gets to the next level and a good, opportunity, good system, good offensive line, he can make a lot of things happen in the NFL.
Yeah, what's going to be interesting actually is now that the Jaguars are likely going to have the number 1 overall pick. Obviously, Lawrence is going there. So if you're the Jets, question is whether you keep Darnold or maybe you take a chance on Fields. I think they're probably going to stick with Darnold, but we'll certainly see. But let me ask you, I think, David, that culture at the college level is extremely important. Obviously, culture is important at any level for sports, but I think that having a great sense of identity is really important. And I think that Paul Chryst is one of the best culture builders when it comes to coaches in college football. There's no program that has a better understanding of who they are, what players they want to target, what personalities they think will fit in the locker room better than that Wisconsin coaching staff, and specifically Paul Chryst. Why don't you think more pundits maybe look at Paul Chryst as one of the best coaches in college football? What is it about him that maybe they don't understand? And what was your experience like playing for a guy like that?
I love Coach Chryst. Everything about him is just salt of the earth. He's a real person. He's a real guy, and he's one of those coaches who isn't going to gas you up. He isn't going to blow smoke. He's going to come out every day and tell you what it is, and he's going to be there right there, shooting life with you, talking about what's going on off the field, what's going on on the field, and he's not going to sugarcoat anything. And I think a lot of times in college football, it's really easy to, especially, as a head coach or, a big program, is to try to make this fake excitement around your program in order to get recruits in there and get media hype and get fans excited. And I think Coach Chris has this ability to just kind of realize that, the best product, the best way to get fans involved, the best way to get coaches or recruits to come to your university is to win games, just play great football and put dudes in the NFL and have them, make a lot of money in the NFL. And he's done that. And, just because he's not out there having, the big, press conferences where there's guys, take the one-liners and, blowing it up, and next thing you know, it's all over Twitter. He just says what he needs to say, talks about the game, talks about football, and then he goes and watches film and gets the guys ready to play the next week. And I love that. And he's a dynamic dude still. He doesn't really show the media that, but there's been certain glimpses on the sideline where I think people can kind of see that he's an intense dude. Miami Orange Bowl is one of those examples that I think everyone can kind of remember. But he's like that every day with us. He gets us fired up, and I love playing for him. And, when you're away from family or going to a school like Wisconsin, a lot of kids are from out of state, and Coach Chris kind of takes on the role as your, I wouldn't say dad, but he's kind of like your close uncle, and he's always there for you. He's there to, put you down when you need to be put down and bring you back up and coach you up and give you a pat on the back when you need that the most. So, but dude, honestly, I think Jonah, the reason why he hasn't gotten a lot of respect on the next level is because, we've gone to these big games and we haven't really been able to pull off the big one yet. We haven't been able to beat Ohio State. We've been close, but we haven't been able to, take that next step and, win a Big Ten championship. And I think, if Coach Chris and the guys can kind of just keep chipping away, keep coaching up dudes, getting guys in great positions, it's going to happen. And it's going to happen, I think relatively soon. You look at some of the younger players coming up in the program, they have a ton of talent. Our coaching staff is by far, I think, one of the best coaching staffs in the entire country. Coach Rudolph, I'm biased because he's my guy. He's my man. I spent so much time with that guy over the past 5 years, but he's a hell of a coach. And I think they have the right formula and the right guys in place to take that next step. And hopefully when that happens, he'll get the attention and the recognition that he deserves.
You actually said something that was really interesting, which is that Coach Chris has done a great job taking guys from different states, out of states, and kind of serving as that uncle figure. You're obviously from Michigan, and so it's not as heated of a rivalry maybe between Minnesota or between Michigan and Ohio State, but Michigan and Wisconsin have been competing against each other for a long time, obviously. So I know that your family kind of has mixed ties, probably, partly Michigan, and your dad played, I think, Eastern Michigan, and you obviously went to Wisconsin. But you said that sometimes Coach Chris would get fired up. Did he ever light into you at all, ever out of practice? Did he ever just get into you at all?
There were a couple of times early in my career where I think every day he was kind of getting after me a little bit. I wasn't necessarily the smartest player early on and just doing dumb stuff, and he lays into you. My favorite memory kind of Coach Chris, though, is it was right before Michigan last year now, 2019, when they came to our place and we put on the Hippo package. And a lot of times seniors will kind of go up there and just give like a little pep talk in the week. And Coach Chris, let me kind of get up there and get the guys fired up because, like you mentioned, I grew up 15 minutes outside of Ann Arbor. My sisters went to Michigan State. My dad went to Eastern Michigan, played ball there. My mom went there as well, but the rest of my family are Spartans. And kind of coming out of high school, neither school offered me. And, honestly, I have no regrets at all. I love Wisconsin. It was honestly the best decision I've ever made in my entire life. But I was a little salty because being a Michigan kid, you want, the two schools in your state where a lot of your friends and family go to, you want them to show interest in you. And, my senior year, when I had the chance to play them both in Madison, kind of put a whooping on both of them, I think was something super special for me. And Coach Chris, kind of in both those moments, kind of, let me take a sort of a leadership role in the team those weeks because I know he knew that it was important to me to kind of put a whooping on those guys. And, it just kind of shows that he cares about his players. And he might not have came out and said it, but, he knows everything that's going on and he knows what's important to the guys in the locker room. And, for him to have the kind of, I guess, heart and the compassion to let me kind of get out there and lead the guys and help out in two of those big victories is something super special to me. And it kind of shows who he is as a coach, and there's so many different memories, you spend every single day with that guy. And there's some stuff I probably can't really tell on the show and we'll tell over beer next time we're in Madison. But no, I love Coach Chris. He's the ultimate guy and hell of a football coach.
I think that another one of the ultimate guys is another one of your former teammates in Jonathan Taylor. And when I was at Wisconsin and working for the radio station, I got to call a bunch of your football games, and I traveled to call some of the games, especially in Penn State and most notably in Nebraska. It would have been your, I think, redshirt sophomore year, technically, your redshirt sophomore season, so my junior year. And I remember I got a chance to interview Jonathan Taylor after the game, and it was probably the most pleasurable interview that I've ever gotten a chance to do. I mean, he demonstrates such class, such character, such a tremendous person, and really makes himself very approachable, I think, to people that are not even just part of the team. What was it like getting a chance to block for him in college when I thought he should have maybe garnered more consideration for the Heisman that year? What do you think of his leadership style and the job that he's done at Indianapolis with the Colts this year?
Yeah, well, first of all, man, like seeing him ball out right now at the next level and having the season he's having with the Colts is awesome to see. And there couldn't be a guy who deserves that more because, you know, I think you said it, what JT is he's pure class. And he shows that on the field. He also shows that off the field, like you mentioned. And having the opportunity to go to work with him every day and block for him, you know, super special and something I still kind of, you know, I know absolutely I still take pride in every single day. And it's kind of funny when you're working or talking to guys and it's fun to be able to say you blocked for a dude like JT who just, you know, went out every single day and worked his butt off, and he came off, you know, in the locker room and he was just one of the guys. But he is a true leader, and the way he kind of works in the weight room, the way he takes care of his body, the way he, you know, takes care of his body through nutrition, and just kind of the way he talks to the media as well. You just kind of see that the way he goes out there and he is a superstar, right? And he's the most humble superstar that I've ever been around or that I've ever, you know, kind of had the privilege to see in my lifetime. You can take all the credit in the world, but he kind of gives it to all of his teammates. He gives it to his coaches, which I think is super special. And he gives a lot back to the community as well. And he really takes pride in whatever atmosphere he's in and where he comes from. And, you know, kind of seeing him have the season, you know, that he had our senior year and seeing the success he's having now, I just couldn't be more proud of the guy. And, you know, I was salty because, you know, we got him the record for Wisconsin, which was big time. And, you know, he won 2 back-to-back, you know, running backs of the year, which is another huge accomplishment. But he deserved the trip to New York. He deserved to, you know, get, you know, number 2. And, you know, he should have won it, man. He should have had at least one of the, you know, one Heisman, one moment. He should be in those Heisman House commercials. And I'm still pretty salty about that. But, you know, I think he uses it as a chip on his shoulder now. And, you know, hopefully one day he gets an MVP in the NFL and wins the Super Bowl. That wouldn't be too bad either, you know?
Not at all. Listen, I hope that the Colts can get in. They need a little bit of help. They need a little bit of help this weekend, but I think they got a good shot, and I would love to see him in there. I also think it's fitting, too, that the team that he got drafted by plays in the stadium that, you know, you guys would play in the Big Ten championship game. Perhaps a chance at some redemption there, personal redemption for him.
I'm just happy that somebody who, you know, wore the W at some point in time is winning games in Indy because that place still haunts me. I was going on a little trip a couple weeks ago, and I drove past Indianapolis and I drove past the stadium, and I still I get so mad seeing that. I was there 3 times, couldn't win it, but hey, I think the guys hopefully coming up will get a chance, and it's just fun seeing JT have success there.
Absolutely. So this is a question I've always wanted to know, because obviously most people say they want to be a fly on the wall in a situation. I would have loved to have been an ant on the grass for a situation like this. I've always wanted to know, what is the trash talk like between offensive linemen and the opponents and the opposing defensive linemen? Is there a lot of stuff said? What's the funniest thing that someone ever said to you, and has an opponent ever made you laugh at the line of scrimmage?
Honestly, man, it kind of depends on the player. And I know everyone kind of has their own different style, but I know when I was there, our offensive line, we kind of took pride in just going out there and having fun. And we wouldn't necessarily, you know, talk smack to the defensive line, but we'd kind of just joke around with them, we try to get under their skin in different ways where, you know, if they made a good play, you just kind of be like, you know, yeah, man, that's a good job. Keep it up. And they're not expecting you to compliment them. And then they just kind of get angry. And then eventually when, you know, you have a big double team, there was a couple times where Tyler and I would have huge double teams, and Tyler was screaming in his face. And then, you know, I would help the guy up and just kind of be like, hey, man, I bet you wish that wouldn't happen. But I've been there. I was on the scout team too. But You better start playing better, or else it's going to be a long day. And I don't know, little digs like that. And in the heat of the moment, you don't really know what kind of comes off your mouth, comes off the tongue. And, definitely after a game, there's more things that you probably can't repeat than what you can. And, a lot of great memories, a lot of great battles. I know the guys in Iowa, we'd always jaw with each other. I know that we played Michigan State. Those guys were jawing up front. But honestly, the really good defensive lines, they don't really, talk too much smack. Like I remember Ohio State was one of those things going against Chase Young and all those good players they had up front, and they were still playing there today. And those guys are just quiet. Don't talk at all during the game just because they know they're going to come out there and just play ball and do their thing. And you almost wish that they would talk because I don't know, it would maybe humanize them a little bit. And I think whenever you get a chance to get in there and kind of talk to the guys in front of you and just kind of get under their skin a little bit, it ends up being a long day for the dudes in the D line and a better day for the offensive line. So that's kind of where it is. It's kind of different.
Yeah, I mean, because listen, none of us are privy to that information. So it's always interesting because I know a lot of the cornerbacks jaw with the wide receivers, and I'm sure the running backs get an earful when they're tackled on the ground. But I always was curious, like the offensive line, defensive line, like I don't know if people are messing around with those guys too much, but that's really interesting.
Well, also most of the time too, you're big boys, and you're out there for long drives. You're just catching your breath. Half the time after the play anyways. You're just kind of suck in and get ready for the next play and go do it again.
Right.
But there's definitely some smack talking going back and forth.
So college football playoff is coming up. I can't believe it's already about to happen in like a week. Who do you got winning the national title right now? Who do you give the edge to?
Man, that's a tough question. I mean, I think it's easy to come out and just, automatically assume that it's going to be Alabama, Clemson. They, year in, year out, have two of the best teams up front. They're super well coached, have great players. But, I would love to see Ohio State and Notre Dame push through there, just get a little difference and kind of being a Midwest guy, get some Midwest teams in there. I'm sick of seeing, teams from the South in the Natty every year. But they both, uphill battles for both those teams. I think they all have great players, which I think, kind of evens it out at the same time. But Clemson and Ohio State have both been challenged multiple times this year, and they just kind of keep going out there and doing their thing. So they're tested and they're ready to go, and they know what it's like to, fight with, fight through adversity and to keep chugging along. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how Ohio State plays because Ohio State's had adversity. They've bounced back in, two big games, Indiana, Northwestern, two big games, but they haven't played a perfect game yet. And I think in order to beat a team like Clemson and then get to the national championship and beat a team like Alabama and say with Notre Dame, they have to play perfect games. Like some of these big games when you go against a good team, going into it that you can't turn the ball over and you have to be perfect. And as soon as, things like that start happening, as soon as you start turning the ball over, going 3 and out, or just making stupid mistakes and just leaving plays on the field, it gets away from you really fast. And that happened to us a couple of times in my career. And, it's crazy. You think you go in, you have a chance of winning. And then before you know it, 2 things happen and the game's over. So it's going to be interesting to see. I'm super excited to see how guys like Justin Fields play because I think he has the ability to be a difference maker and kind of cause a headache and hopefully get the Midwest and the Big Ten or even, Notre Dame in the national championship.
Not to mention, Ohio State should have beaten Clemson last year.
Right. I know. I mean, the same thing happened last year.
They should have beaten them last year. So, and now you have Dabo Swinney coming out talking all this smack, and that Ryan Day is going to be fired up in his team.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that.
I love seeing that, man. I love seeing Dabo kind of get out there and talk that. But, I think Ohio State, Ryan Day, I met him when I was getting recruited back in the day, and, he's a fiery guy. So I think he's going to have the boys ready to go, and hopefully Ohio State can, pull one out for the Big Ten.
Well, I wasn't even planning on asking you this, but now that we brought this up, I'm just curious. As a player, what would motivate you more when an opposing player would talk smack or an opposing coach?
Man, players talk smack all the time, and so that's like kind of nothing new. That the guys on the other side are going to be fired up. But I think when coaches don't give you credit, because the coaches watch the film all year. That's all they do. They never see their families even. I don't think they just kind of. They practice, they eat, and they go watch film, and they do it all over again for 4 months until the new year. So I think when a coach comes out and blatantly starts talking smack, I think that gets under your skin, and that gets you, fired up and ready to go because, players, that happens. They're the same age as you. But when a coach comes at you, you go to bat for your coach. You go to bat for the guys in your locker room. You kind of join together and put a beat down. I remember when we played Central Michigan my senior year. Central Michigan, their head coach, Greg McElroy, I believe. He was the old Alabama OC. He was at Florida or McElwain, I think. He was at Florida for a little bit. But he came out and took a shot at us and took a shot at our coaching staff. We took offense to that, and we practiced all week with that in the back of our minds. And, we let him have it on Saturday. So I think definitely is a trigger and can get guys going.
All right, final question, then I'll let you go. What have you been up to now? Are you sticking around with football and sports at all? What is David Moorman doing, and how can we reach you?
Hey man, well I'm washed up now. I'm working in software sales for Oracle, and I'm loving it. It's super competitive. I love my company. I love the people I work with. I miss football. I love talking to guys like you and staying involved in any way I can, just because passion of mine. And who knows, maybe one day I'll break into high school coaching here and there on the offensive line. Love to stay involved and stuff like that. But it's good to see you, man. It's to all you fans out there. Jonah and I went to college together. We had a couple fun times together in college, so it's good to be able to see him and talk to you guys.
Absolutely. David Moorman, former Wisconsin offensive lineman. Thank you so much for joining me, and happy holidays to you and your family, man. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too, man. Happy holidays, everyone. Stay safe.
All right. David Moorman, such a pleasure to have him on and get that insight. All right. Final topic of the day. My favorite moment of the day. You know what time it is. Malkin's Moments. Final segment of the day. Every single show. I got a great Malkin's Moments for you this week. 2 Malkin's Moments for you this week. The first, Steph Curry hit his 2,500th three-point shot against the Bulls yesterday. He's got over 2,500 three-point shots yesterday. I don't know if anyone saw the viral video that went out a couple of days ago where in practice he hit 105 straight three-pointers. It was a video lasting 5 minutes. So that is an unbelievable mark. He became just the 3rd player in NBA history to reach that milestone. So congrats to Steph Curry. That is fantastic. And then my second Malkin's moment of the day, one of the first times ever we got a real treat on Christmas. The Minnesota Vikings got a chance to play against the New Orleans Saints. And did you see Alvin Kamara? 6 touchdowns for Alvin Kamara in a 52 to 33 win, rather. Became just the 4th player in NFL history to record 6 touchdowns in a game, a career high 155 yards, ties an NFL record for the most rushing touchdowns in a game. He was absolutely sensational. So that's all the time that I got for you today. Thank you so much for joining me on Morning Joe right here. I will not be here on Wednesday. I will be gone, but I wish all of you guys a happy new year. I'll be back next Monday on January 4th, I believe. So again, appreciate you've been listening and watching Morning Joe on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitch TV, Twitter, and on YouTube. Every Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. As always, have a lovely rest of your morning and a happy new year.